it is really important that we not forget the young people who aren't here. And the AmeriCorps young people have done a lot of great things, and City Year was my model, and at least when I left office was the biggest AmeriCorps program. I presume it still is. You started one here. I helped to start the program in New Orleans and started one in Little Rock that my foundation helps to house. And we started one in South Africa, which has now involved 250 young South Africans. I visited that program, and I watched them make a school come alive. This is really important. But now that City Year is focusing on keeping young Americans in school, graduating, and going to college, I think it is important to say that this may be the most important thing they can do. Why? Because we know that what you can earn depends in part on what you can learn, notwithstanding the current difficulties of recent college graduates in finding employment in this economy. We know it's a knowledge-based, interconnected world. And we know that there are all kinds of pressures on people to drop out of school, particularly if they don't master basic skills by the time they're 12 or 13. The probability that they won't stay is enormous. We know that some schools are doing a great job and others not so well. And that one of the great weaknesses of American education is that we don't replicate excellence as rapidly as we should, which is why I support Joel Klein and the mayor in this charter school movement in New York City. I think it's the right thing to do. By the way, that's another idea I ran on in '92, and people looked at me like I had slipped a guess. They had no idea what I was talking about. When I was running on promising charter schools, there was exactly one charter school in the entire country, Minnesota. One school. And there were two states at that time which had authorized it, the other being Arkansas. We were slow off the blocks. We were just second, and we're in the process of setting up our schools. But when I left, there were 2,000. Now there are thousands of them. And yet, if you follow the New York press, you know that there are literally some of these schools where 20 times as many people apply to get in as can be physically admitted. But to get back to the point, why do they matter? Because they can inspire young people one-on-one to make the most of whatever educational opportunities they have. They can inspire people to stay and graduate from high school, and they can help them find a way to go on to college. This is a huge deal. And this is another thing I want all of you to think about. What I try to do in my foundation now, and what I try to do with the Clinton Global Initiative, bringing people together, is to get people to focus on how to solve problems. Most of the time I was in politics, we discussed two questions for 30 years. What are you going to do, and how much money are you going to spend on it? Remember the debate about President Obama's stimulus program? He said to the Congress, I'd like $900 billion. And then Paul Krugman, the great New York Times economist, said, no, you need $1.3 trillion. You should do 10% of GDP because assets are collapsing so fast. Asset values are going down. You got to put a real floor into this economy and build a stronger bridge while we wait for the financial reforms to take hold. And then the Republicans said, oh, no, you can't possibly increase the deficit that much, which was fairly laughable coming up from them. But anyway, they said, we just doubled the debt of the country and had less than 3 million jobs to show for it. But anyway, they said, no, spend $600 million. And then they debated, well, what will you spend the money on? So the president says, well, we got to split this up in three ways. I, by the way, agreed with that. He said, we should give some money in extended food stamp benefits and unemployment benefits and modest tax cuts to give people spending money who otherwise wouldn't have it to keep the grocery stores open and keep the basic fabric of society going. And then we should give about a third of this money in direct grants to state and local government because otherwise there'll be 1 million teachers and healthcare workers laid off, and it will do terrible damage. Or in the alternative, state and local governments will have to raise taxes, and that will undermine our recovery. And then there was a third part, and only the third part, which said we got to invest some of this money to create jobs, infrastructure projects, clean energy projects. And so then there was a big argument about that. Well, should we have more unemployment benefits, or should we have more money for clean energy? And since I spent a lot of my life on that, they couldn't spend enough to suit me. But anyway, that was the argument. And then there was the argument, no, you should do more in tax cuts. But there was very little discussion in the public about what do you spend 800, which is about what the president got, as I remember, 800 billion or 900 billion or $1 trillion, and whether it's a third or a 50% tax cuts. How do you design the spending, and how do you design the tax cuts to maximize the number of new jobs you have, to maximize the amount of long-term good you do, to maximize your ability to increase incomes? We need to be in the how business. And that's another reason that I support what the AmeriCorps kids are doing. They either teach these kids to read or they don't. They either convince them to stay in school or they don't. They have a simple way of keeping score. And they have to learn over and over again in dealing with people in vulnerable positions how to do what they set out to do. And when they're done, they know if they did it or not. And I think we need to create a whole mentality that all of us need to be in the how business. And that brings me to the last part of what they do. Trying to get kids out of high school and into college is more and more difficult because we have not asked ourselves, as we should have, for the last 10 years, whether we are answering the how question properly in higher education. We have known since the 1990 census, almost 20 years now, that there is a direct and deep correlation in income growth and education level. Income inequality in this country has increased in every year since 1973, except the 4 years of my second term when we had such tight job markets and so much support for working families that the bottom 20%'s income actually increased slightly more than the top 20%, and we had 4 years of growing equality. Otherwise, and it's a global phenomenon. It's formed by the forces of the shifting economy, which all of you are familiar with. We have known since the 1990 census that if you have 2 years of college or more, your chances of getting a job with a rising income are better than 50%. And if you have less than that, your chances are less than 50%, and they go down, down, down the less education you have. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is like, and sure, are there exceptions to the rule? Yeah, LeBron James didn't have to go to college. And if I had a body like that, I would have gone in a different line of work. And he's plenty smart, by the way, and so a lot of those other people. I love to listen to other people talk. They know what they're doing. But it's really important. And yet, we have said, so I tried to respond to this, and I didn't ask the right how question. I thought always that one of the finest achievements of my second term as president was that we passed the largest increase in aid for college education, the Hope Scholarship tax credits, the graduate school credits, 1 million more work-study positions, big increase in the Pell Grant, and the direct loan program, which now President Obama is trying to make universal, which saved billions of dollars for students and for the taxpayers. I was really proud of that. It was the largest increase since the GI Bill. Now, it's not that I'm not proud of it anymore, but you just need to know this. The gains of that effort had completely disappeared within 3 or 4 years of my leaving office. Gone in the inflation in college costs. The last 10 years, on all kinds of higher education, including community colleges, enrollment's up 40%. Staff is up 100%. What does that tell you? There is something wrong with the how in higher education, with the delivery system. States all over America are recognizing this. There are now 17 states that are allowing community colleges that cross certain academic hurdles to offer 4-year degrees. Why? Because the young people can access those degrees at flexible times and hours if they have to work to support themselves at a cost of somewhere between 25 and 35% of what it would cost them if they had to go to a 4-year school. And I say this because we're having this debate in New York over the delivery system for public education. That's really what this whole charter school thing is about. You know, when I started this, we had real support among a lot of people who are now opposing this because they saw it as an alternative to the voucher movement, which I did not support because I thought it spread limited public dollars or concentrated them in too few people instead of figuring out how to make the system work better. But I ask you to think about this. If they're going to get all these young people ready to go to college,